and she has put together a number of courses that reflect what she wants to do and what she wanted to explore and what she wants to do in her future. And so she has done an examination, which she will tell you, of the fine arts and how they help with persons with communication disabilities. And so I think without further ado, I will turn it over to Anna, who again is a graduating senior, and this is her capstone project, which is a required process for graduation. And again, I will just let her go ahead and present. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Anna Christie, and I have an invisible disability. I have dyslexia, which, while normally is known as a learning disability, is a form of communication disability as it affects my auditory comprehension and pronunciation just as much as it affects my spelling, writing, and memory. I have always struggled in traditional academic settings, as it takes longer for me to memorize things and to understand things than the average person can at a much quicker pace. In fact, my family has had a history of communication disabilities, specifically dyslexia, which has given me more of a passion and drive for understanding and working with people with disabilities, and has inspired me to want to be a special educator when I grow up. Being homeschooled, I was allowed to participate in many different forms of the fine arts, including ballet, martial arts, theater, drawing classes, and piano lessons. Throughout this presentation, I will be referring to the fine arts as visual art, performative art, and musical art, and all of that will be explained later on. As I have a desire for working with people with disabilities, I decided to make my capstone based on how the fine arts can be used as effective tools for teaching people with communication disabilities. But first, let me give a quick definition of what I mean when I refer to a person with communication disabilities. When I say communication, I am referring to the act of encoding and decoding information. So to have a disability in this aspect, I am referring to a person who struggles or has difficulties or abnormalities in producing speech, having language comprehension disorders, and struggling with social cues. There are three general types of communication disabilities. The first is physical disabilities, which refers to physical, neurological, or structural conditions that impact one's ability to communicate. Examples of physical disabilities include articulation, fluency, voice, hearing, and facial expression disorders. The second type of communication disability refers to mental disorders, or how a person's brain works that directly affects their ability to communicate. Mental communication disabilities refers to things such as aphasia, apraxia, autism, Rett syndrome, Heller syndrome, and learning disabilities, including dyslexia. The final type of communication disability refers to acquired disabilities, which can come through things like brain injuries, through tumors, strokes, or blunt force trauma through vehicular accidents or physical abuse. These can cause symptoms like memory and attention disorders, as well as physical disorders that affect one's ability to communicate with others well. Other examples of acquired disabilities refer to diseases and vocal cord injuries, psychogenic or selective mutism and stuttering, and regionally different dialects that affects one's ability to communicate that appears similar to physical or mental communication disabilities, because the way a person speaks may be different and, as such, hard to understand by others. Some psychological communication disabilities may be obtained through traumatic experiences, making it harder for people to speak up out of fear, shock, or simply not understanding what happened to them. Well, art has been recognized across cultures for millennia. It is only recently that people have started to understand what educational benefits they may have on people. For centuries, people with disabilities were hidden in family homes and kept away from society. In the 18th and 19th centuries, asylums became popular places for family members to put their loved ones, as it was seen as a way to keep society safe and undisturbed by those who were deemed to be mentally ill. Wards were considered to be less than human, and any form of art that they created would, as such, be seen as meaningless. Through the works of disabled artists, such as Vincent van Gogh, who is speculated to have mental illnesses such as bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety, and Ludwig van Beethoven, who became deaf throughout his career, and many other disabled artists across the years, people began to recognize the beauty and importance disabled people's arts can have. As such, in 1975, the Education for Handicapped Children Act in the United States allowed the government to provide free public education for people with physical disabilities so that they may be involved in the least restrictive environment. Usually this meant that they were added into art classrooms. In the 1990s, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, reauthorized previous educational acts to include children with all disabilities, including learning disabilities and communication disabilities. Howard Gardner, an American psychologist, is known for his contributions to early childhood development. He stated that people shouldn't rely purely on IQ tests when devising intelligence, as intelligence is more than just understanding literary, answer speed, and rhetoric skills that IQ tests tend to focus on. Instead, Howard Gardner believed that people have different learning strengths and weaknesses, and that intelligence is, quote, the ability to solve a problem or to fashion a product that is valued in one or more cultural settings, end quote. He believed that schools should teach in a variety of ways to broaden learning experiences and exposures. He believed that there were at least 7 different learning styles, or intelligences as he called, that people can strive in. Public schools tend to focus on the first 3 of linguistic, logical, mathematical, and interpersonal skills, as these are usually seen as the skills required to get a job here in America. Meanwhile, intelligences such as musical intelligence, spatial intelligence, and body kinesthetic intelligences are seen as secondary or not needed for general education. Gardner disagreed with this mentality, stating, quote, we need to be able to draw on a much wider set of talents. There should be recognition of and serious attempts to make full use of all combinations of human intelligences, end quote. When referring to the fine arts, there are 3 different types of general art education. First, there is visual art, which refers to the use of using tools to write out one's thoughts without using words. This can be great for people with speech impediments as well as trauma victims. Examples of visual art include things such as painting, drawing, sculpting, photography, interior design, fashion design, and architecture. The second type of fine art refers to performative art, or moving one's body and facial expressions to tell a story or express an idea. Forms of performative art include theater, including improv, dance, including things such as ballet, tap, jazz, and other forms of dance, poetry readings, martial arts, and acrobatics. Similar to performative art is American Sign Language. American Sign Language, or ASL, is a nationally recognized language that is entirely composed of gestures and facial expressions. As such, it has no written or spoken form. This is great for people not just with communication disabilities, but for those without, as it encourages children, even those without communication disabilities, to reach out to and interact with each other. Instead of singing, people who are deaf or who use sign language will often create poetry as their form of creative expression. Speaking of singing, the third aspect of the fine arts is musical arts, or creating auditory vibrations to create an experience. Examples of musical art include vocals or singing, instruments, composition, including both traditional and digital composition, and conducting. Education in the fine arts is more than just a means to get a job, but is seen as a way to experience and live life to to the fullest. Of course, there are many benefits a person may receive when studying in the fine arts. First, there are cognitive benefits that include things such as enhanced creative, imaginative, and innovative abilities, as well as critical thinking skills. Secondly, people may experience emotional and physical regulation, as the fine arts can act as therapeutic activities that help develop sensory processing and enhances both fine and gross motor skills. Next, the fine arts can help develop self and cultural identity, as they can create a sense of purpose that enhances both confidence and self-esteem, while providing a healthy means of expression. Heightened cultural awareness can also lead to cultural sensitivity, which encourages empathy and can lead to social justice. Finally, the fine arts can enhance classroom management, as they can help foster collaboration and teamwork among students, which naturally encourages communication, and improves academic performance by increasing concentration and motivation through activities that people enjoy doing. To better understand the connection between the fine arts and what people generally think about them, I conducted a survey. This survey had 42 participants, ranging from professionals to family members of people with disabilities. Most people agreed that the fine arts were beneficial in some way, as you can see in the far right column. 50% of people wholeheartedly agreed. People stated that the arts can, quote, provide a freedom of expression and individuality, end quote. The fine arts are also believed to help children relieve the feeling to move during the school day, as children are usually forced to sit still. And let's be honest, what kid would rather sit down the entire day rather than get up and move around or play an instrument or create a painting? Out of the three forms of fine arts, the survey concluded that musical arts were deemed to be the most beneficial, followed by visual art and ending in performative art. When asked how well they saw the schools implementing the fine arts, a majority of people were not quite satisfied with what their schools were doing, or believed that their schools could be doing more. Admittedly, most participants said that they did not know how to answer because the fine arts are not easily seen or used in either their or their children's classrooms. Still, the arts are usually seen as extracurricular activities and not intended for school time, as schools tend to focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM education, as these are seen as more practical to get jobs than the fine arts. Of course, the fine arts take more time and money to implement, but thus making them harder for educators to teach. But the desire is high, and the benefits are obvious. As such, educators should incorporate the fine arts to the best of their abilities while being willing to ask for help when needed. Examples of how one could implement the fine arts could be putting music to learning multiplication facts, putting acting out mock examples of history subjects, and drawing out different scientific formulas and terminologies. Of course, here at Cedarville University, we must always understand that there is a Christian aspect in everything that we do. The fine arts are seen all throughout the Bible. For example, in the Old Testament, David played music to soothe Saul's soul and danced before the Lord. Solomon's temple was crafted from fine craftsmanship, and the Psalms declare that nature itself proclaims God's glory. The fine arts can also provide people with an alternative means of worshiping God, especially when they normally struggle to participate in traditional worship. My brother, Daniel Christie, has both autism and ADHD. When he was about 10 years old, he began to experience hearing loss. Now, he is completely deaf in his right side and mostly hard of hearing in his left side. But he can still do amazing things. Why should I introduce him, though, when I can have him introduce himself? On Sunday, March 8th of this year, Daniel played piano for the first 15 minutes leading up to my home church's service. I have a clip of him doing that now. As you can see, while he may be no Mozart, he is able to utilize his abilities to worship and serve God in a way that many people in his predicament may not have even considered. The fine arts have been used across history, but only now are we beginning to understand the educational impact it has on people with disabilities. The fine arts can be used as tools for people with communication disabilities to connect it to others. So it is vital that schools teach the fine arts as part of their curriculum. While there is a financial cost involved in producing the fine arts, people should recognize that the benefits that children receive from them are worth it. The arts can also act as an alternative form for worshiping God by using His creation to reflect His intelligent design. As Christians, schools need to be more involved in the fine arts, and we should advocate for schools to implement the fine arts more, because as Christians, we need to speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. Thank you, and any questions?
Anna, good to hear from you today. Thank you for the presentation. Dr. Yang and I have enjoyed working with Anna over the last couple of years. And this presentation today, I think, exemplifies the fine work that she has done, the research that she has done in the area of fine arts and humanities. And we appreciate the presentation that's here. Anna, would you say, I'll open the questions with this one. Would you say that it's easier for, I believe you came out of a homeschool environment, is that correct? Is it easier for homeschoolers to implement the use of arts, both performative as well as perhaps musical arts? Is it easier for them to do that in a homeschool setting than in a public school setting?
I would say yes, as long as you know where to look. A lot of programs, specifically school-related programs, will not let homeschoolers join their existing programs, and so if you do not know to look outside of just school-related activities, you may find a hard time finding different theater programs or musical programs. But being homeschooled, you are allowed to make your own curriculum, and so you can choose where you want to spend your time more. And as such, if you can find a music teacher, if you can find a local theater program, you can find art classes, which really there are a lot out there. Again, you just need to know where to look. You need to either have the right connections or be able to put in the research to find them. You can easily implement the fine arts more when you are in control of the curriculum. And so yes, I would say being homeschooled, it is easier to use the fine arts than when you were in public school.
Good, and I like the way that you suggested go to the community itself. There may be things in community centers or community learning programs that will help homeschoolers and perhaps even someone in a Christian school or a public school setting that needs additional help. You might be able to find that in the community itself. So, good suggestion, thank you. I got one more question for you. So, your brother played piano. Who taught you how to play piano?
Miss Tanya, and then his current teacher is Miss Alexandria.
Yeah, I've not been on top of quite high school musical performance, but yeah, as my mom said, he has had piano teachers, but he's really more focused through my mom. My mom even though what my brother does is he doesn't really look at the notes that's being played, he looks at the keys instead. My mom will still kind of use her finger to guide to help show him, so if he gets lost, he can look back up if he needs. And so, while he's had he's had two different teachers who they have kindly been able to help teach him how to actually play. It's through the help of my mom that he is consistent at playing.
Good. And you really demonstrated the point right there. I was kind of waiting for mom to get all the credit here. My mother is a licensed piano teacher, and all that. But it's not. Why you encouraged it and you give some guidance, you found the help in the community. So that's really very good. I'm going to open it for other questions. Dr. Yang, do you have a question you'd like to ask, or anyone else?
Well, I can ask Anna, from your survey that you did, which was, I thought, really a unique way to approach your research in a very fitting way. What was the most surprising or the top thing that you learned from doing that survey?
Probably that the musical arts were deemed to be the most beneficial. There seemed to be, just in general, I had an open section where people then could defend why they chose which form of art they said to be most beneficial. A lot of people just kept on saying that out of all of them, they most prefer the musical art. And personally, I prefer the visual arts, and so just listening to people's different defenses for why they prefer music, not saying that I dislike music, I love music, but just that they think that was the most beneficial specifically for communication. I found that to be more interesting because, as I said, musical art is all about creating auditory vibrations. That's not something you can see. And so usually when referring to people with communication problems, it's not referring to visual impairment, and as such, being able to look at a picture, follow along with drawings, I would think would kind of trump over music in some ways, but the research showed, the survey had, that people generally agreed that the musical fine arts is the most beneficial form of fine arts. I did not expect that.
Kind of a follow-up question to that. Do you have like a suspected reason why music is more? Like it's like an emotions thing, or?
Music can definitely affect emotions. Happy music can lighten your mood, sad music, even if you're happy previously, can bring you down. So there's definitely probably somewhere emotional, but it also just how universal music can be. You can easily put music to, as I said, you can put it to multiplication facts for math, you can put it to history sentences for understanding history, you can put it to scientific terminology stuff. You can basically turn anything into some form of music, because music is so related to poetry, and poetry does not follow traditional like English followings, and so if you can just take any random sentence you have, put it to a tune, and as such, it can be used when you don't have anything around you. As I said, the fine arts can have a cost to them, specifically the visual arts, as I say, you need tools to work with them, but musical art in some ways does not need any tools. You could purely rely on like clapping your hands to create rhythm and then singing lyrics. And so, because that can be so widespread then, without needing a cost, I feel like in some ways people might see that then as the most easily accessible in some ways.
I had a question about your survey too. Could you share a little more about like who the pool of people were? Like, how did you find them? Or sounded like you had a variety of people. You weren't focusing on a really narrow group.
No, ma'am. I made this survey and then sent it out to a whole lot of professors from the communications department, education department, fine arts department, musical department, theatrical department, as well as I opened it up to my friends and family members, specifically stating, hey, feel free to share this with whoever you'd like. Just please, I'm trying to get as many participants as I could. And while honestly, I was hoping to get more like 50 participants, 42 is honestly not that bad. I know for a fact not all the professors answered, because I sent out like 57 emails to do not know their identities for. The survey was entirely anonymous, and so I could make guesses on who did stuff. I will say, I have no idea who actually fulfilled the survey. I kept it entirely anonymous as to not bias anything.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? I like the chart, it looks very colorful. Now, with my own disability, color blindness, I can't really tell who's who here, but it looks really good. So it's right down there. Would you join me again in thanking and congratulating Anna Christie for a very fun presentation? Very good. We'll take a break before the next session.